And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Eesha Patel, who had a profound awakening and contact experience in her mid-20s that set her on a journey of exploring consciousness. In her current role as Galactic Ambassador, Eesha liaises with over 20 different galactic races, including the Arcturians, Pleaidians, the Galactic Federation, and the Orion Council. Eesha, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Well, we are happy to have you, Eesha. And I'd like to start with, how did you get in contact with the ETs in the first place?
I think they got in contact with me is probably a little bit more accurate. So actually I was going through quite a difficult experience in my life in my mid-20s, and it was through the challenges of coming out of a relationship and rethinking my future and what I was going to do. I guess that's what really led me to asking the universe to say, is there something more? Like, can I be in a deeper level of service? And I guess on some level I must have been ready for it, but also the universe really does listen to us when we speak. And so I put this big call out there and said, hey, I want to do something bigger. I want to do something with my life. I want to be in service somehow. And literally within 24 hours, I had the Arcturian Golden Council of Light contact me. So um it was like a spontaneous channeling experience. That's how I kind of experienced that.
Did you have an interest in sci-fi or UFOs or anything before you made this call out to the universe?
I didn't have a lot of interest in sci-fi, which is almost ironic given what I do. I mean, people always ask me, "Oh, have you watched Star Wars and Star Trek and all those things?" And to be honest, I haven't watched most of them. It's just it kind of just came to me because I was interested in spirituality and I was interested in meditation. So I had a meditation practice leading up to that moment where I made contact for the first time, but it wasn't something that I necessarily went looking for. In fact, it was a bit of a shock to my system to even realize that there are these beings and I'm not making it up in my head, and that why don't we get taught this in school? Why doesn't anybody know about this? So yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with sci-fi influences when I was growing up. I think it was I went looking for something bigger than myself, and then surprisingly, this is what I found.
You said you had a meditation practice. What type of meditation were you doing?
So when I was in my early 20s, I have to give a bit of context on this. So when I was in my early 20s, I was experiencing just some weird energetic stuff going on in my house. And there was this lady that I met. She was actually my dance teacher in Perth. And she said, look, why don't you come over? I can teach you some tools to help protect your energy field. And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but the practice that I learned back then, it was called the Merkaba light body activation. And so she showed me this picture of this Merkaba geometry, which is essentially two tetrahedrons in 3D. And you visualize these tetrahedrons rotating in opposite direction. So one of them goes clockwise, the other one goes counterclockwise. And I would just sit there activating my Merkaba light body every single day for like 18 months before I experienced anything profound. What I didn't know at the time was that specific practice, and I could have done any meditation practice in the world. I could have done mindfulness. I could have done even like Reiki or like so many other practices and modalities. But it just so happened that the Merkaba light body practice was the first one that I stumbled upon, and that's actually your vehicle for interdimensional travel. So here I was in my early 20s doing this meditation practice to try and protect my energy field. And then by the same token, really open myself up, opened up my chakras. And I think that's what set the foundation for that contact to come in quite quickly later on down the track.
So you're saying that the Merkaba practice that you did is essentially for this galactic transportation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Merkaba light body is what you use to take your consciousness into other dimensional realities. And the way that I discovered that actually was quite by accident because, yeah, about 18 months after doing this practice, I was just sitting in meditation. I activated my Merkaba light body, and next thing, it was like my body it had just completely dissolved. Like I was just in this space of complete oneness. And then I heard this voice in my head that said, "You're in the 13th dimension." And I didn't know what that was. So I went on Google, all right, hey, Mr. Google, tell me what's the 13th dimension. And there was nothing on there. Nobody knew anything about it, especially back then, over 10 years ago. There wasn't this sort of education that you have these days. And so, yeah, I just had to figure it out. And, there was one article I came across back then that said there are 12 dimensions in the universe. And I thought, oh, well, that's something. But I very distinctly heard the voice saying you're in the 13th dimension. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean? And so it became a journey of discovery for many months after that, where I would sit in meditation and I tried to so many times recreate that experience because I feel like that moment was quite spontaneous. It was almost like this moment of awakening or enlightenment. I don't know what you call that, but it was a felt experience of oneness where I knew in that moment at a very tangible, visceral level that my body is the temporary body and I am the same as the house and the trees and the universe and the cosmos and the animals and everything in between. And when I felt that sense of oneness, it was like I just went, like everything just kind of expanded from my heart and yeah, it was pure bliss. And then after a few seconds it was all gone, and that was it. It was just this moment of experience that has been so profound ever since then.
Was that voice from your higher self or some other being?
That's a really great question. I know now that that voice was my higher self. And how I know that is because I've sat there many times with my higher self and I know the energy of my higher self now. But at the time that I had the experience, I didn't know who it was. I didn't know what it was. It kind of felt like me, and it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. But then you could also just as easily mistake it and say, "Oh, that was a voice of God." It wasn't in this instance. It really was just my higher self. But at that time, it felt like it was coming from outside of myself, and really, it was just coming from an aspect of me.
Can you take us through that first initial contact?
Yeah, my initial contacts happened through trance channeling, which I don't do anymore, and that's a whole story in and of itself why I don't do that. But the initial time that it happened, the very first group of beings that came through were the Mayan elders. And they said, "Hi, we're the Mayan elders." I don't know who the Mayan elders are. But anyway, they gave me this information, which that very first channeling was more just for myself. It was consoling me. It was saying, "Hey, Eesha, everything's okay. It's gonna be fine." Because I'd come out of this relationship, I was heartbroken, I was crying all the time. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Like there's just a lot of changes going on in many different aspects of my life. I was questioning my career. I was questioning a lot of different things. So yeah, I was just laying in bed and I said, "Hey, I want something more out there." And yeah, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I get this voice that says, "We're the Mayan elders," and they had a message for me. And the experience of that I still recall as being so unique because I mean, I'm a bit of a fast talker anyway, I know that. But the voice that came through was so fast, I couldn't keep up with it. I could barely even understand it. I did have the wherewithal to get my phone out and record it. I don't have that recording. I don't know what's happened to it now. It was many years ago, but I did record it at the time. And I remember coming out of that trance experience and going, "What just happened? Who was that? Was that me?" Because the information that was coming through, it was like it was so fast that my brain couldn't even process it. And yet my mouth was speaking it. And then it wasn't until I went and listened to what I had recorded that I could try and comprehend the message that came through for me.
Once you went back and listened to it, were you like disturbed at all or asking yourself, hey, am I crazy? Well, what's going on here?
I think I spent the next year asking myself if I was crazy. I mean, quite frankly, it was very outside of my reality at that point. To contextualize, I came from a scientific background. I studied engineering. So, having studied chemistry and physics and all the sciences, and then suddenly having this voice come through saying, we're the mind elders, that was absolutely nuts for me. I mean, it was to the point of sheer unbelievable. And there were moments then when I thought, should I go to a doctor? Should I get myself checked out? Because maybe this is a trauma response, maybe because I'm just going through a lot, maybe this is a trauma type thing. And I think I questioned myself quite a lot for pretty much an entire year. And there was a very specific moment that happened a year down the track that made me actually realize that this is all real, and it was the tangible piece of evidence that I needed to stop doubting myself.
What was that?
So that experience that made me believe, I was sitting with my friend in her house up in the Perth Hills. And at this point, I'd had about a year of telepathic contact. I was still doubting, still had no idea if any of this was real, still had no idea if I was making this up. But I had many experiences of channeling by that point. At this point, a year down the track, I'd met the Arcturians, I'd met the Pleaidians, I'd met probably a couple other galactic races by that point. I'd met Ashtar Command and the Galactic Federation. Anyway, so I was sitting in this friend's house, and both of us are quite galactically connected. So at this point, I knew, okay, there's a craft above us. I could sense it. I was making telepathic contact with it, and so was she. And then she said they're sending down a beam of light, and a beam of light actually came down through the ceiling into the room. For about 30 seconds, the entire room was filled in what looked like this thick white fog. And my friend, who was sitting on the couch just a couple of meters away, it was like her face was miles in the distance. I couldn't see her hair. I couldn't see her body. I could just see this outline of her face through this thick light. It lasted about 30 seconds, and then it went away. And then I spent the next 2 hours in shock, not knowing what had just happened. But that was the moment where I believed, because one was that I saw it with my own eyes. Two was that someone else saw it too. So I had validation. And it was such a physical, tangible experience that from that moment onwards, I could not deny the existence of these ETs. And to top the icing on the cake, when I went out a couple hours later, after getting over the shock of what had just happened, we saw above the roof of the house, the craft was still there. It flashed red and blue 8 times before I went home.
What did it look like?
I just remember seeing it as a flashing light. Like, I think I was still too in shock, to be honest, to really like get the details of it. But we saw that it was there. It was flashing specifically 8 times, and it was like just above the roof of the house. So it just, if anything, it would have looked like maybe like a orb of light that was flashing red and blue.
Was it big, or maybe the size of a car, or even smaller?
It was probably about the size of a tennis ball in the sky.
Hmm. Interesting.
Like looking up, it was like quite small, but it's hard to gauge distance because it would have been in the sky, but not as far as like, say, a plane.
Okay, so it was pretty high then. For some reason, I thought it was like, 4 or 5 meters above the house.
It's it it's so hard to it looked like it was just above the roof, but at the same time it was small, so it could have been far away. And that could have just been the perspective that I was looking at it, because I was standing on the ground looking over the roof, and it looked like it was just behind the roof. But it was like small, about the size of a tennis ball.
Did it look more like kind of like plasma morphing between the two colors, or did it look like a flashing light, like red, blue, red, blue?
It was definitely flashing. But it's like the light, it's like what I was seeing was the light, and I didn't really exactly see the craft that was behind it, if that makes sense.
Mhm. All
It's
right.
not like I saw a metallic craft. It was like the light of the craft that flashed specifically 8 times and then stopped.
And
And
then,
it was just like alternating in red and blue, but like just over the roof of the house.
so by that time, you'd already had contact with quite a few ETs. How many ETs are out there that at least you've had contact or you're aware of?
I've personally had contact with at least 20 different races. Some of them are humanoid, like for example, Arcturians, Pleaidians, Syrians, Andromedans, Vegans, Lyrians, and so on. And the beings of the Galactic Federation, Ashtar Command, they're the ones that are more in humanoid form. I've also had contact with some different galactic races or beings that are a bit more like say in like animal form. For example, there's a beautiful group of jellyfish beings in the IC 443 constellation. And I've had quite a lot of strong contact with them over the years because I know that I have a soul aspect there. So so sometimes the jellyfish will come into my dreams and I'll see and perceive these beautiful, massive, these like pink and sort of violet like or magenta like beings that will communicate with me. So they're not humanoid, but they still have intelligence in the way that they're able to communicate with me.
Have you seen any of the videos out there of beings that I think that they call jellyfish beings kind of flying around?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, okay.
Are you talking about craft or like
I think it's like a craft or something, but I've seen one or two videos like on somewhere, one of these social medias where people had video and it was just kind of flying in a straight line.
oh, no, I haven't seen that. I'd like to. Yeah. That
Yeah.
sounds cool.
Yeah. I was wondering if that's what you saw.
My jellyfish beings that I communicate with, um, yeah, they're not like craft. They're like actual jellyfish. Like they like what you would find in the ocean. Like they've got this sort of plasma like sort of structure to them, quite squishy tentacles, made of light. And I've taken some really great like all black photographs where I've captured them on camera as well over the years. So yeah, this just, sometimes I find that when you have a close connection at a soul level with a specific race or a specific group, you're more likely to have contact with those beings. So I've got a few photographs where I've gone out and I've been telepathically communicating with it, but then I've taken a picture and a jellyfish has actually showed up on the screen.
When you're having a telepathic conversation with the ETs, how does that play out? Like, do you end up channeling their end or do you just hear them with inside, like being clairaudient or what?
The way that I communicate with these beings is definitely a telepathic contact. It used to be more in the form of channeling. So when I described to you that initial interaction, like with the Mayans and initially the Arcturians as well, it was that they would come through me. And the reason why that was happening was because that was really the only way that my consciousness could keep up with that and get past all the doubt and all the fear. And so it was like back then, it was like my consciousness had to step to the side and then these beings would come in. Nowadays my method of communication has changed a lot because they said to me that really it's much more sovereign to have a communication the way that you and I are speaking without needing any entities to come into my body. That form of channeling is more of like a last resort. And it's not something that the high vibrational beings prefer to do because there is this level of sovereignty that humans have. And if we can expand our consciousness to communicate with them telepathically, then they don't need to enter us in that channeling form that a lot of people are doing. So essentially they taught me what I would call is a more evolved way to channel, which is where I'm not allowing the energies to come into me, but it's like in my mind, I'm having a conversation with consciousness. And there's a specific frame that allows me to do this. It's called the inner heart meditation practice. Don't ask me how this works. It's some crazy, like universal language that apparently all the beings know. When we access our inner heart, which we do through our heart portal, our heart gateway, and you go in there, there's a garden landscape in there, and all the beings in the multiverse know about this space. So you can go in there and you can set up meetings and conferences and connections with any being in the universe, and that becomes your access point. So when I take myself into my inner heart space and then I ask, say, Arcturian being or Ashtar or whoever to show up, they'll meet me in that space and I can communicate with them telepathically without them needing to enter my energy field as this being.
Is there a YouTube video out there somewhere that teaches how to do this?
So I teach this in my courses and programs that I run. It's something that I learned quite a few years ago, and when I learned that this was a universal language, it was quite mind blowing. Actually, Drinvala Melchizedek talks about this in a slightly different way to how I say it, but he talks about the tiny heart or the tiny cave that you have inside of your heart space, and it's kind of similar to that. So you go into your heart. There's a beautiful garden there. There's a very specific landscape. It does take a little bit of training to learn this. But once you get it, it's like anything, going to the gym, riding a bike. Like there's a little bit of learning that you need to do. Once you get that down pat and you know how to access that space in a safe way that's still allowing you to be discerning of the energies that are coming in, then you can set up meetings with any being in the universe. So it doesn't matter even what realm they're in. They don't even have to be galactic. I can go into my heart space and I can connect with Archangel Michael. I can go in there and connect with elemental beings. I get all sorts connecting with me in there. Even Gaia, the energy of Mother Earth, Gaia. I can receive messages and make contact. And also there's other things you can do in there as well. Like, for example, people talk about the Akashic records. Well, I can go into my inner heart space. I can access my own records, and I don't need to be in a state of hypnosis. I don't need to be regressed. But it does take a skill to be able to self-guide yourself and lead yourself into this state of consciousness so that you can then be open to these connections with everything that exists in the universe.
Have the beings revealed to you what's going to be going on with the Earth in the next 6 months?
There's a very specific place, and I have to say, I have to sort of preface this a bit. Different people read this differently. I have a connection with the Order of Melchizedek and the Orion star systems. And the Order of Melchizedek, they're responsible for the overseeing of what happens with the divine order and the timelines. So when I'm tuning into what's happening, say in the next 3 months or 6 months, they show me from a really big macro perspective of what is going to be unfolding. Although I have to preface this a little bit by saying that timelines can always change, and I'm very wary of making predictions. And it's something that I won't do. I won't make predictions because I believe that we have the capacity to change things and that our collective consciousness can co-create things as well. So they'll show me what the likely timeline is, and then they'll also say what we can do as a human race to shift that. I mean, a great example of this is we have coming up the 1111 gateway, right? So what they showed me in that is there's the current timeline, and then there's the timeline we could be on if we gathered together millions of people and did a mass meditation and consciously created that reality, because that can shift the timeline. So there's a real I guess interactive element to this, a co-creative element to this as well, where we as a human race get to decide how these timelines unfold based on the optimal pathway and the choosing of this spiritual ascension, if that's what we want as a society.
Do you think that humans should be trying to make contact with ETs?
I absolutely believe that humans should be initiating contact, and why I'm so strong in that belief is because to ignore the presence of so many different beings out there, I think is simply foolish. I mean, if we are to evolve as a human race, and if we are to really step up into our next level of evolution, embracing the galactic beings and their existence is going to be a really pivotal part of that. It's not that much dissimilar to what we've seen in our history. I mean, here in Australia, we've had such a harsh history when it comes to the acceptance of the indigenous people. Just because they were a different color and from a different land, they were, basically just told that they were like not even human beings. And if we are to evolve into our mastery of evolution and to step into our higher spiritual selves, we need to embrace all human beings, all animals, and all ETs. It's that next obvious step. It's like the next natural progression so that we as a human race can learn to be more unified and find the sameness and the peace within not just our earth but also our galaxy. Sounds like a bit of a big stretch, I know, because we still have war on our planet, but at least if we can begin by initiating the contacts, one of the big benefits to that is that we can learn from these civilizations who have attained peace. The Arcturians, they're master healers in the universe. We have a lot we can learn from them. We can learn from the history of other races as well. And I think all of that is going to help us as a human race evolve and become part of, rather than separated from, the rest of the universe out there.
Some people believe that there are some malevolent ETs out there, as well as some experiencers have had bad experiences. So, is it possible if you start making contact that you will contact an ET race that may, do something bad to you?
Not every ET is benevolent. I can definitely tell you that from firsthand experience. I don't think that should be a reason for us to not make contact though. The way that I describe it is like if I go to some, I don't know, dodgy part of Russia or something, and I see a gang there, I'm probably going to walk past and just keep moving. Does that mean I'm never going to talk to any Russians? No, no. It just, it seems like people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because they're saying, well, some ETs are malevolent, so we shouldn't make contact at all. When in reality, it's that all, you know, all beings have a level of, I guess, a scale in which they are benevolent or not. And just like humans, they're also in a state of evolution as well. I mean, heck, they themselves might look at humans and say, oh, we're not going to make contact because humans kill and steal and they lie, and you know, but that's also not fair if you're looking at the reverse situations. So I think let's take it with a, you know, let's take it with a grain of salt and say some beings are benevolent, some beings don't have the best agendas, but at the same time, can we accept that they are also in evolution, and maybe together with our wisdom and their wisdom, we can both be better for that. One thing I do always say when I'm teaching contact work is always have discernment. You would let your friends into your house, but you wouldn't let just anyone off the streets into your home. And by that same regard, do have a level of discernment in your energy field. I have a really great practice, if you like me to share, Jeff, about how to tell the difference between the good ones and the bad ones.
Yes, please.
So I learned this through experience, having connected with many different races, that the high vibrational beings, the beings that are benevolent, they will respond to a vibration of love. I know it sounds cheesy, new agey, whatever, but it works, right? So when I'm going into any level of contact work, I always set the intention that I want to connect with only beings that are of the highest good, the highest light, and that have positive intentions for the human race. So when I set that frame, I know that then I'm only allowing and giving permission to those beings to come in. We do live in a free will universe, and when you set that intention out there, there is a value to that. But secondly, if something does get in, what you can do is you can practice discernment. One of the ways that I do that is if there's a being coming towards me and they're making contact, I first of all perceive their energy, which people do this in different ways. For me, it's a color. I usually get a color frequency, and then I might get a name, I might get a visual. So that says to me that a being is trying to make contact. And if I haven't met that being before, the first thing I do is I take a moment to drop into my heart, and I imagine that I'm sending out this beautiful love. I sometimes visualize it like a white light going out towards them. And if that being is also in a loving vibration, they will step forward into that energy and they will make themselves known to me. On the very rare occasion that a being is not of that loving energy, or they have some malintentions or whatever, they will either stand still and not come closer, or if I ask them 3 times, who are you, reveal your true self, usually by the 3rd time they have to reveal. Hasn't happened very often, but on the very rare occasion, I've had some sneaky energies that have tried to get in, and I've used this practice, and then they've shown me their true self, and I said, no, thank you, you're not allowed in my energy field, and they have to leave. So that's something that I do anytime that I'm making contact with a being that I haven't met before, or even when I was first starting out and just learning how to do this, I would do it every single time to check the energy of the being to make sure that I am actually connecting with the being and that they are who they say they are.
You sent me a photo of a UFO. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that picture that I've sent you, I got that photograph when I was in Serbia last year. I was with my friend and my partner. We were on our way to a monastery, and we literally stopped on the side of the road because I saw a stork, and we don't have storks in Australia, and I thought it was really cool. So I said, stop the car, I want to take a picture. So so my partner, he stops the car, and I got out of the car, I clicked a few photos on my iPhone, sat back in the car, and just as we were driving off again, I was looking through the pictures and going, oh, what a cute little stork. And then one of the photos, there was this object in the sky, and I thought, oh, that's really strange. What is that? And so I had a look at it, and it was just really odd because it was one of those live photos where it takes a couple of different seconds of footage. And as I played that live shot over and over again, I could see that there was the bird, obviously the stork that I was taking the picture of, and then there was another bird in the background. And then there was this object that only showed up on one single frame. And I thought, okay, that's strange. And also, what's even stranger is that was the image that coincidentally was the main picture, the thumbnail. So when I was scrolling through my pictures, it just showed up really, really clearly. And when I went to have a closer look, it wasn't something like, it wasn't a bird, it wasn't a bug, it wasn't something flying past the camera, because otherwise it would have shown up on every other frame. So this object just showed up in this split frame, and then it just disappeared. And so when and I did some bit of analysis on it, I changed the contrast and all that, and you can see that it is actually a solid object. I then sent it off to Dave from the UFO Birmingham group, who did an analysis on it, and he also said that there was something anomalous going on. And as I was driving away on that day, because I suspected it was a craft, I did make a telepathic contact as well, and I said, "Hey, if this is a craft, tell me who you are, where you're from." And immediately I saw this picture of some greys and some other beings that were on board that craft as well. And they basically said, "Hi, it's us." And they were actually trying to make contact with the friend that was sitting in the car with us. And I realized that that came through as a message for him. So yeah, it was the combination of the photograph plus the telepathic contact that made it a bit more tangible and real from my perspective.
I've interviewed a lot of near-death experiencers, and a significant number of them start seeing UFOs or having some sort of contact afterwards. Why do you think that happens?
My theory on near death experiences is that when you have a near death experience, you cross the veil, you go to the other side, and then you awaken an aspect of your consciousness. Now, in my ideal reality, you wouldn't need to die in order to awaken to that level, but sometimes that's just the way it goes for people, and that's people's soul's journey. When you go and have that experience on the other side and come back, it's quite common for people to have more heightened paranormal experiences, spiritual experiences, and UFOs, because you're more connected to now what's on the other side. You're more connected to the other dimensions than what you were previously. So I think it really is just to do with the expansion of consciousness that happens when you cross to the other side and come back.
Previous to this incarnation, do you think you were an ET?
I've definitely got lifetimes, and I don't like to use the idea of past lives because it's all simultaneous. So I have coexisting present lives in other dimensions and other spaces, and I know what some of those soul aspects are. Like, I know, for example, I do have a version of me on the Lyran star system. I do have that jellyfish soul aspect of mine. I definitely have an Arcturian soul aspect. So I've got many soul aspects that are experiencing these different realities, these different experiences in different times, dimensions, planets. And when you expand your consciousness, you can draw on the experience and wisdom of these other dimensional lives as well, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, do you think other versions of yourself that are existing simultaneously as ETs are visiting you here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's this is where it gets very matrix like at the moment, because, like, for example, I have a soul aspect of mine called Lily, and she's on board a starship called the Aru Terra. When I was in Sedona earlier this year, the Aru Terra came through as a physical citation that was witnessed by about 60 people at a contact event that we held. It stayed there for about 30 minutes, flashing every 20 to 30 seconds. And then I was channeling, I was receiving information. But I know that the reason why I had such a strong contact is because it was my soul aspect. So I think having that conscious connection with these soul aspects of ourselves can increase the UFO sightings as well, because sometimes the beings on board are really just aspects of ourselves that are making contact with us through the dimensional barrier.
Do you regularly channel ETs for people or just for yourself at home and record them?
I teach other people how to make contact more so than channeling. I do believe that we all have the ability to make contact. And so it's up to each of us to initiate our own contacts and to discover our own soul aspects. I do have some sessions with people where I will connect with their soul aspects and their galactic guides, just as a means to help them get connected. But it's not so much channeling, it's more just like they will communicate with me. For example, I had a recent session with someone, and yeah, this person's pregnant, and so I was receiving a bunch of messages about the baby from that person's guides. And of course, the longer term goal is for this person to get connected herself. But I will sometimes receive messages if they're important and they want me to share it at a particular moment in time.
Do you have any idea when we're finally going to have complete Open disclosure?
Open contact will happen when we choose it. And that's the whole idea of this collective co-creation. Now, that timeline has shifted quite a lot in the last few years. I mean, we all know 2012 was supposed to be the starting of the golden age, and contact was meant to be a part of that. And we weren't ready for it. So they shifted it to 2020. 2020 didn't happen for all the reasons that we know. And the new timeline is now, it's set for 2027, but I say that it's a vision. And one thing I see is people get really fixated and they go, well, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, people get disappointed. And I say, yeah, but what did you do to make it happen? Because the communication that I have with the ETs is that it's like we're working together towards the common goal, but it's equally up to us as it is to them. There's no magic wand. Nobody's going to wave a wand and say, suddenly, we're all ascending now. It's when each and every one of us chooses it. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations. And thank you, Jeff, for having these conversations on your show, because the more people that recognize the role that we play, the more that we can actually create this. So 2027 is the goalpost that we're all working towards with the galactic team, but it's going to depend upon how involved the humans are to get on board with that. And so there's a big call out at the moment for each and every one of us to make this a priority, to take action on that, not to sit on the sidelines, but to really come forward in that movement, start spreading the messages, sit down, do your meditations, do the inner work. And that's how we get there.
It seems like to me the majority of people think that something's going to happen in 2025.
Yeah. I have seen that as well. And that's where, so timelines do fluctuate. And also the 2027 one, it's kind of like the end post. It's like if all else fails, we need it to happen by 2027. So in an ideal reality, something big is actually going to happen next year as well. The way that I've currently read the timelines, though, what's the best way to describe it? It's like it's not fully grounded in yet, because again, there's the collective co-creation element of this as well. So, I mean, I'm all for everything happening sooner, but let's make it happen. If we want it to be 2025, let's all work towards that. And if it doesn't happen 2025, we do have the 2027 as a marker for that. But again, it's going to come down to how ready are we as a human race. Disclosure isn't dependent upon any one person. And I'm definitely not holding out for the government to be the leader of this. I think disclosure is in the hands of the people, and I think it's up to us. That's the whole premise behind First Contact and what we do. Is that the first contact is your first contact. It's when do you make your first contact? When do you go out in your backyard and initiate that contact for yourself? You can make it as early as 2024 for yourself if you want to. So we've got a few months left of this year. Make your first contact in 2024. Don't wait for someone else to lead the way. It's becoming your own trailblazer and really initiating that for yourself.
You said something like it needs to happen by 2027. And that makes me think, or else what?
Or else we go into a really long-winded ascension that I don't want to go through. So it's just, we are in, a lot of people have said it in the way that it's a fail-safe ascension. And I've understood it to be similar as well. Ascension is happening, rain, hail, shine. That's it. It's happening, right? The question is, does it happen in a smooth way, or are we going to go through multiple disasters and pandemics and all the things before that happens? And this is where the element of conscious choice and creation really comes into this, because there are so many potentials and so many timelines that could get activated. And it's up to us to open our hearts and to collectively choose and rise into that positive timeline together. We've been given essentially another chance after another chance up until 2027. If the human population is still not ready by 2027, which God forbid, I hope does not happen, things could get a lot more difficult for us. We're still going to go through ascension. It'll just be a really bumpy road, like really bumpy.
Has any of the ETs given you a specific message for you to relay to humanity?
Yes. The Galactic Federation always wish to come forward and share how much they are proud of us as a human race, They remind us on a daily basis that they are here for us and that we can call out to them at any given moment in time. They have our best interests at heart. They want to see us evolve as a human race. And also, their message is to keep remembering our true essence, to not get lost in the day to day things of the world, and to keep remembering that the more we be kind to each other, the more we love one another, the more that we embrace each other as human beings, that is the pathway. That is the pathway to contact. That is the pathway to our humans evolution. And it's always a message of love. You know, if Ashtar came, well, he is coming through right now. I said, if Ashtar were here right now, and the second I say that, he's like, hey, I've got something I want to say. Let me just drop in for a second. Our message for the people of Earth today is to always remember your kindness and to remember the love that you are. We are holding you in the highest vision of love always, and we have for you a beautiful pathway that is laid out for you if in the moment of your choosing you choose to step into it. This 2027 timeline that we speak of is what we perceive is the highest potential. There's a beautiful Trinity energy that flows through the year 2027, and that if the Earth's ascension and the open contact and disclosure happened during that time, it would be optimal. The event that people speak of in 2025 is a precursor, pivotal, but a precursor to the main event that is still coming, always keeping in mind that you humans get to choose and that we give you your free will and your ability to make contact from your heart center in the time and place of your choosing. We hope, of course, that this moment is in every day, in every moment, and yet we are always here for you in the pathway that you choose for yourselves. And we send you so much love and so much gratitude for the work that you do every day on planet Earth.
Can you tell us more about who Ashtar is?
Ashtar is a beautiful being. He's one of the beings as part of the Galactic Federation. His role, he doesn't just work with Earth. He actually does quite a bit with bringing unification across the many galactic worlds as well. I mean, really, the bigger vision in all of this is intergalactic peace, not just peace on Earth, but it's peace between all the different galactic races. And yeah, Ashtar plays quite a significant role in that, in bringing this unification about through the galaxy.
I've heard before that there is an actual ET war going on around us or outside of Earth. Is that true? And if so, what do you know about it?
What I know about the war, there's two aspects to this. Um, there is the war, and then there is the false war. And it's really important that people understand the difference. I mean, we're getting into some real deep interdimensional kind of stuff here, but essentially you've got the 3D, which is the reality that we're in, right? It's a physical reality, and everybody talks about going to this 5D ascension. The fourth dimension is actually typically the astral realm and still contains duality and polarity. And that's one of the reasons why Gaia has asked for a 3 to 5D ascension rather than a 4D ascension, because the 4D ascension is still going to have elements of polarity in it, which can be quite harsh if we go down that pathway of ascension. So yeah, coming back to the question, when it comes to the war, some people are picking up on the war between different galactic races, which, yeah, some galactic races are out there. But then there is also a war that some people are picking up on that's actually just a big distraction of what we call, yeah, I mean, I just, for lack of a better word, it's a big distraction and it's not really real. It's like people pick up on resonant energies, similar to like, okay, if say for example you go into a house and something really violent happened in the house would carry the energy of that experience. And if somebody was psychic, they would go into that house and they would see that experience, that violent experience happening again and again and again and again. And as more people tune in, that almost makes that experience more real. But what it is it's an energetic remnant of what's actually happening. The violent act may have happened and there's truth, like there's a level of truth in that, but what's happening is the people are picking up on the energy frequency that's still stagnant as a result of that. So it's like this energetic left behind momentum that's not really real. And so a lot of the people that are picking up on this galactic war, they're picking up on something that actually happened a long time ago that's no longer present. Because if you look through that, you look through the frequency to what the truth is, a lot of that stuff isn't even really happening anymore. So what I say to people is really drop into your heart and feel the truth of what's happening in the present moment, because there's the eternal now, and then there's also the eternal all happening at the same time. People pick up on things that are not really happening right now. And so that's what I mean by energetic distractions. It's like stuff that just sits around in the fourth dimensional astral realm that isn't really present right now. But the more that people put energy into it, it's actually kind of feeding it and keeping it alive. Rather than, if you to use the analogy of the house, you could go in, do a space clearing on the house, and the energy's gone, and then you have a beautiful new home, and all those images are no longer there. So I think sometimes what needs to happen is more like an energetic cleanup in the fourth dimension, so that people aren't tuning in and recreating those experiences that are more just shadows and not really there.
All of these star systems are very far away, even if you're traveling at light speed. So, do you think the ETs are getting here through portals or through wormholes?
There's definitely an interdimensional element to how they travel, and I think, there are some people in the more nuts and bolts side of ufology who think that extraterrestrials are actually getting on ships and are flying all the way to Earth. And I think that's just absurd. I mean, I don't think there are technologies that can do that in the 3D physical time space continuum. More likely what's happening is there is some sort of wormhole travel, and there is some sort of interdimensional component, which is why consciousness plays such a big role. It's quite similar to people who see um like supernatural phenomena coming through portals or wormholes and that sort of thing. Very similar with UFOs. And it's also why, I mean, a lot of the craft experiences that I've had, it's like they'll come and then they'll just disappear out of nowhere. If they were traveling in the third dimension specifically, you would see it more like a plane or a satellite, where it would have this continuum of movement. But a lot of the craft that I see, they'll flash a few times and then they're gone. Well, where did they go? They have to be going through some sort of portal or some sort of interdimensional travel in order to be able to have that experience.
Eesha, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, more than open to it. And anyone who wants to learn how to make contact or learn how to drop into the heart in a deeper way, um, I'm fully here for it.
What's the best way to contact you?
I am most available on Facebook, Instagram, and through my website. So if you go to www.eeshapatel.com, that's EeshaPatel.com. And you can also search for Eesha Patel on Instagram and Facebook. Drop into my DMs. We've got a beautiful community as well, galactic community that you can be a part of. I'm more than here to help support you and help lift you into this next wave of our human ascension.
Do you have anything that you're working on that you want people to know about?
So the next event that we have coming up is the 1111 Gateway, and I, from the bottom of our heart, invite each and every one of you to join this event, because the vision for this event is to bring together as many people as possible. We know from scientific studies in the past that when people do mass meditation together, you can literally reduce crime rates, you can shift the collective consciousness. And so we are recreating that experience on this year's 1111 Gateway, where you can come and join in 48 hours of rolling activations, meditations, and contact experiences. It's all completely free of charge. So just come along. If you find me on my website or my socials or my Instagram, I'll happily send you the link to that. Come along with all your friends and be a part of this amazing global movement towards open, peaceful contact.
Eesha, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Always remember that you are empowered to choose and create this reality, and contact is in your hands, people. I cannot say this enough times. Contact and disclosure is in the hands of the people. That is where the power is. Don't listen to any of the negative stuff out there. Go out into your backyard, look out at the night sky, invite and initiate these positive, loving connections with our star family. And let me know how you go. Come and message me, tell me about your contact experiences. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being a part of this planetary ascension.
Eesha, thank you for your message and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you. It's been so wonderful.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.